In this problem, we're working with a function f of x equals 6 minus 2/3 x squared. First, we're supposed to find f of 0. So that 0 inside the parentheses means that's what we're going to plug in for x. Zero squared is 0, and 0 times 2/3 is 0. So here we just end up with the statement f of 0 equals 6. So as I mentioned, that 0 stands for x, and then f of x is another way of saying y. So I read ahead to part D, and so I'm going to make a note that the point xy equals 0, 6 is on the graph. Okay, part B, find f of negative 2. Order of operations says I've got to do negative 2 squared, which is 4. And then I've got to multiply 2/3 times 4, which is, I can change this whole number into a fraction, and multiply straight across the top and straight across the bottom. So f of negative 2 equals 6 minus 8/3. And then maybe I want to do a common denominator. 18/3 is equivalent to 6. So in the end here I've got 10/3. So another point. Let's see. Put a box around the actual answer to the question, and then make a note for myself. Another point on the graph is the ordered pair x comma y. So x is negative 2, and then y is 10/3. Okay. C is a little bit different because I'm solving. I'm not plugging in a certain number for x, but I've got f of x equals 0. So here, this whole left side, f of x, is being replaced by the number 0. And then I'm supposed to find out what x would be to make this true. There's different ways to go about this. I like to clear the fractions when I can, so I'm looking for the least common denominator, which is 3, and I'm going to multiply through the whole problem by 3, left and right. So 3 times 0 is just 0. And then on the left, I've got to distribute that 3 to both terms. So 0 equals 18, and then the point is that when I multiply 2/3 by 3, the 3 in the numerator and the denominator cancel out, and I've cleared my fraction. So that's just a little bit easier for me to work with. And I can see that there's a GCF. And now I can see that that's the difference of squares. And now my zero product principle says one of these factors at least has to equal 0. Well, 2 doesn't equal 0, so that's not a solution. But I could have 3 minus x equals 0, which we would rearrange to say 3 equals x. So that's one solution. Or 3 plus x equals 0, which rearranges to say x equals negative 3. So there's two solutions there. Okay, and then again, how I was kind of thinking ahead about points on my graph. Let me just make another note. 2 more points are my ordered pair always lists the x first. So 3, and I started out saying f of x equals 0. F of x is a synonym for y. So 3, 0, and negative 3, 0 are also points on this graph. Okay, so now on to part D. Clear this out from the last problem I was working on, and I've got 6 minus 2/3 x squared, and the instructions said to graph with a standard window, so zoom standard. Okay, so I've got that upside down U shape. Label the points associated with my answers to A, B, and C. So f of 0 equals 6, and then I wrote myself a note about that point 0, 6, over 0, up 6. So that's A. And then in part B, I wrote myself a note about negative 2 10/3. Let's see, so what about these points? Is negative 2, let's skip over to C and do these points, 3, 0, and negative 3, 0. So that's a C, 3, 0, and a C, negative 3, 0. And that's just helping me orient myself to where to put this. Negative 2 10/3 is not as far over as negative 3. Finally, I use my graph to help me find the domain and the range. So the domain is all the possible x values. Sometimes we draw these graphs with arrows on the end to show they go on forever. It'll keep getting a little wider and wider as it goes down and down forever. So that means the domain, the possible x values, are all of them. But the range, it definitely only goes up to 6. And it does include 6.